Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Real Estate Leadership and Legacy Podcast. On today's episode, we have Ken Bekendam talking about real estate development, the challenges, some of the big opportunities that he sees province-wide. It's a ton of awesome information from a guy who's just a wealth of knowledge. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Once again, remember, click subscribe and follow us for more great content. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am super excited to introduce our podcast guest today, Ken Bekendam, to the Real Estate Leadership and Legacy Podcast. Ken, how you doing today, man?
Yeah. World, creating housing units wherever possible. Yeah, it's an exciting time to be in the industry and all the changes happen.
I'd say. I'd like to start off a little bit of a bio, just so that the listeners can learn a little bit about yourself. So, Ken Bekendam is the president and CEO of King Homes Inc. and LegalSecondSuites.com. He's an accomplished real estate investor, contractor, and architectural design consultant who has honed his skills in transforming existing residential and commercial properties into multi-unit dwellings. He possesses extensive knowledge and experience in construction, zoning bylaws, and building codes, making him a valuable asset for the investors who want to maximize the potential of their properties. Ken's team of talented designers collaborates to create sustainable and innovative solutions for underutilized spaces. And by utilizing his expertise, he helps investors identify opportunities to add additional housing units to existing properties, thereby increasing rental income potential. This approach is financially beneficial for investors and addresses the growing demand for affordable housing and promotes densification in urban areas. So, from a personal experience, ladies and gentlemen, we use Ken and his team on just about everything that we've touched, especially here in the local area. Obviously, out of province, it's been a little bit different, but like we've converted, I don't know how many properties together with you guys' design help.
No, I've lost count.
I don't know. It's been lots. So it's a pleasure actually, and like having met through business and through networking, I'm very happy that of course, you've now become a closer part of our life, where I would call you a very dear and close friend. Ken has actually held my children. So just to put in perspective, we've gotten very close over the years. And so having him on the podcast, talking about real estate, talking about leadership, and talking about legacy is something that was a no-brainer. So once again, thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day. And I'm really excited to what you have to share.
Yeah, awesome. You know what? It's Alex is doing wonderful, amazing things as well, man. And it's great that we can kind of grow in this industry together, and also give good leadership to those that are following.
For sure.
And helping, just share our experiences.
For sure. Now, I know you've been doing some stuff on the radio, and you've been really promoting. So, what do you see right now in terms of the real estate world? I know you're into a ton of things. So you're doing infill development right now, or like a full unit development. I don't know how many units is that one.
I have a number of different stuff going on. I guess on the larger side of what's going on right now is I'm developing 34 stacked townhouses in Brantford, Ontario. And so we're getting very close to we're site plan submitted. So we're just working through the site plan approval process at the city. But yeah, we're very close to breaking ground. It's almost shovel ready. So yeah, very exciting project.
Now that in itself has been no easy feat. I know you guys have gone through some pretty wild challenges. Do you want to kind of talk about that before we kind of move on to some of the other stuff? Because I want to hear about everything that you're doing, but let's delve in a little bit.
Yeah, like on the townhouse side of things, land development is it's not a quick process. This particular project has been in the works for almost 4 years, from first acquisition to the various levels of zoning approval and developing the plans. Midway through, we did decide to pivot a little bit and add more density to the site. But it just takes time to go through that process. Unfortunately, I wish things could go faster. But with the land development stuff, it's like your team is the most important part of it. The consultants that you work with, the professional, engineers, civil engineers, urban planners, architects. Is it like the surveyors, the condo lawyer? There's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of stuff has to be coordinated properly. So it's really important that you're the quarterback of your team. As the developer, the lead developer, you're the quarterback of your team. And so it's incumbent upon you to be making sure that you're properly coordinating everybody. Because if you're just relying on the consultant to do it for you, well, things are going to fall through the cracks. And this is stuff that I've learned firsthand going through a land development project. Is that it's really incumbent upon us to really hold people's feet to the fire, especially when it comes to timelines and getting technical documents back on time. It's a really interesting time to be a developer in the market, considering, cost of construction is increasing, house sales are still somewhat depressed, house prices are still somewhat depressed, and, just because of the high interest rate environment that we're currently in right now. So we're seeing a lot of developments kind of getting shelved, if you will. Like land development is not as profitable as people think, from the outside looking in. It's no less or more profitable than many other types of businesses, right? Like you still kind of operate on smaller margins. And if those numbers aren't aligned, your costs, your expenses, and what the projected revenues are going to be from the sales, it doesn't make sense to move forward with different developments. And so, hopefully we see a shift coming up in the spring market. We are seeing house prices increasing slightly. There's talks about interest rates possibly being cut further this year, which will hopefully spur further confidence in the market for purchasers. But yeah, we have our development coming up, and we're looking at all options right now. We're very close to launching our pre-sales, but we're taking it week by week with what the numbers are coming back at. And we're trying to hold off on as long as possible from actually launching until we see the market be a bit more favorable right now.
I think about the timing of all that. There's if you think there's a massive capital infusion to get the land, secured the land, you finally got it. And then there's additional cash infusions that you keep having to feed into this kind of money pit, for lack of a better word, when you're talking large developments, from like consulting fees, architectural fees, this type of phase 1 or 2, environmental. I know you guys have had some historical kind of issues as well, or some sort of, because it was on archaeological studies. Yeah. Exactly. So, when as an investor who's kind of looking to graduate to those next levels of, like, you do the odd duplex, triplex, then you get into apartment buildings, and then you're getting into eventually land development, it is a pretty big kind of burden of cost and playing with your carrying costs as well. So have you found that the infusion of capital has been a challenge to sustain, or like how do you overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve. For how much capital you have to have kind of to feed the animal, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
To keep it going, month to month with your holding costs, paying the consultants and stuff like that. This is where it's important to have, access to capital in order to, to pay all the consulting fees and the application fees and the interest payments on the land. Obviously heading into this project, I do have a business partner. So we split everything 50-50. So it's not something that I'm fully carrying the full load on. I do have a business partner that's, he's a mortgage broker. So obviously, there's some skill sets there as far as capital raising, to secure funds to help cover these carrying costs. Again, we're still, I'm still a small time developer. I'm not a big boy. Like, we still have, capital constraints, if you will. I have my reserves. I have my own access to liquidity with my own portfolio of projects that I am tapping into, in order to help feed the beast, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's definitely having to be. It's not necessarily creative financing. I wouldn't say it's that. It's having good relationships with lenders that believe in the project. And the numbers have to speak for themselves too. And so heading into the project, we had feasibility studies, we had very strong appraisal reports, we have good cost consultants that we work with to really help keep our numbers aligned. So when we started out, a couple years ago into this process, we had an understanding of the cost that would be required to feed this, and we made sure that we were positioned, to have enough capital to kind of see it through to the sales side.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Do you mind talking to us a little bit about that archaeological study? Because I find that especially when projects become so big, it's hard to comprehend some of the challenges you're gonna hit when you come across certain things, and this happened to be a pretty big one for you guys, right?
Yeah, so the archaeological study wasn't the issues that resulted were directly on our land parcel that we had. It was an adjacent land parcel that we were looking to acquire to further expand our townhouse development to another 34 units to basically double the size of the development. And so we were going through some studies on that particular land parcel, and our land parcel came back clean through the phase 1 archaeological study, and they did a phase 2 dig.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, this phase 1 archaeological study, what induced that? Was it just because this land in particular was known to kind of have been a historical site, or was it that a neighboring property had a phase 1 archaeological study at one point and it came up positive, and then because of that the city required it, or is this just a general requirement for any sort of land?
Well, so at the very beginning, when we went through a pre-consultation, one of the required studies that was going to be required as part of the zoning bylaw amendment, was an archaeological study. And this particular land parcel, it's located in Brantford, Ontario, very close to the Grand River. It's under the traditional territories of the Mississauga, the New Credit, Six Nations, and the Haudenosaunee. And so there is a duty to consult. There's a requirement, a duty to consult with the Indigenous, especially when we're within their traditional treaty lands. And so obviously it depends on the location of your land parcel. Not every parcel is going to trigger an archaeological study. But if you're definitely working in Southern Ontario, I would say, more than likely it's going to be a requirement to at least have a phase 1 study. And the phase 1 is just looking through like the historical use of the land, and seeing if there was any, Indigenous activities that may have occurred on that land. And if there was, then it would trigger like a phase 2 to do some excavation pits, some digging.
I think that's super fascinating.
So anyways, to go to this study on the adjacent land parcel, we had a phase 1, we had a 2, and then they ended up finding artifacts in the phase 2 dig, which triggers a phase 3 and very likely a phase 4 dig. And what's wonderful about archaeological studies is that they can't really give you any sense of the cost of what it's gonna be, because ultimately, if you think about it, they're digging, and you don't know what you're gonna find under the ground. And so, like, we had, from the low end, it's going to be like maybe 60 grand for a phase 3 dig. But if it went into a phase 4 dig, which most likely it was going to lead to a phase 4 dig, the end dollar amount that you could spend on that is unknown. It could,
that's wild.
It could be a few $100,000, could be $500,000. Like, it's such an unknown. And that's part of the reality of land development, is that there are unknowns, and there's many points along the journey where your development can get derailed, you know. And it's one of those things that you do have to go into eyes wide open. And this is where it is important to have access to reserves, access to liquidity, good relationship with lenders, so that if a big ticket item like that comes up, there's going to be a way to pay that invoice.
For sure, no doubt. Now, so I assume you guys aren't going ahead with that additional 35 units or 34 units?
Yeah, so ultimately a result of that, because we couldn't, really have a clear end number of what that dig was going to cost. And again, we're not deep-pocketed developers. For us, the risk of getting hit with a $500,000 bill, to us, it was too risky. And it's ending up kind of basically stalling that development, stalling even for that landowner that, and we're still in conversation with that landowner about possibly developing that site, but it's really hung up on this unknown about this archaeological study. And so it's unfortunate. Obviously it will eventually get developed, whether we end up developing it, finding the right equity partner who's willing to kind of take on that risk with us, of a potential $500,000 bill. But yeah, sometimes this stuff can really stall a development, and unless they kind of make some changes to the regulations or the requirements, or there's some sort of responsibility, I guess, on the provincial side to help cover costs of artifacts and archaeological studies for developers, we're going to see a lot of stuff kind of getting paused because of it.
Now, this whole, talking about that from like a provincial or legislative standpoint, when you're talking about timing of this whole process, you're going from an acquisition, rezoning, then site plan approval. Of course, there's architectural, consultants and all kinds of stuff intertwined in the midst of it all. The process, that 4-year time frame, is that how long it's been going on for right now? Or is that from start to finish of the project, you're estimating 4 years?
Yeah, so we're in it for 3 years. We have we're almost at the finish line. So it'll be almost 4 years start to finish.
Start to finish. Okay, so
acquisition to building permit issuance.
To building permit issuance. Okay, so at this point, shovels theoretically haven't hit the ground for build yet. This is just planning consulting.
This is planning.
So 4 years, ladies and gentlemen, just for planning and consulting. So there's interest you have to pay on the land, and then obviously, as you call it, feeding the beast. Do you think that this 4-year time frame is, in your perspective, is that a reasonable time frame? Is there no other way we could kind of speed that up, or are you no, this needs improvement big time?
Well, so no, there's definitely room for improvement. So this is where it's really important to how you structure your land purchase at the beginning with the landowner is crucial. So this property, we didn't close until zoning approval, until the zoning bylaw was approved, right? So that was about 2 years into the project.
So that's good. You don't have to pay the interest on any sort of carrying costs.
That it is very common in the land development space that we are working with the landowner to get the approvals in place. Whether you close at zoning approval or you close at site plan approval, that varies from project to project. From agreement to agreement with the landowner. Ultimately, for the developer, the longer that you can push out that closing date, where you don't actually have to be paying interest payments, it is better.
The better, for sure. Now, the benefit for the seller at this point is that you guys are going through all this due diligence. In the event that you guys walk away, he might be able to secure some of those checkpoints for himself, like having a property rezoned, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's an agreement in place, right? It's a firm agreement to purchase the property. Basically, but one of the conditions is zoning approval, right? And let's say you don't get the zoning approval, right? Well, the land's not worth as much without the zoning approval.
No doubt.
And so there are points of exiting along the way until basically you close, right? And so, and this is stuff that, we're learning as we go here too, about, the best way to structure these land deals. And especially as you get into the construction financing aspect of the project, which that's what we're in right now, the construction financing aspect, and making sure that there's enough equity in the deal for like a Meridian One or a Desjardins or a Libro or one of these construction, like new construction lenders to meet their lending requirements. So again, this is where how you structure the deal with the landowner and when you close and whether or not sometimes the landowner will come into like a GPLP structure with the developer in order to kind of show the required kind of equity in the deal in order for the lender to extend the construction financing.
That's actually a smart thing. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, and then the landowner gets paid out later on. With every sale that happens of a unit, the landowner gets a disbursement of funds as you go. So that's something that's really important, especially on the construction financing. Is you can have a landowner who more than likely owns the land free and clear. They can join into your corporation as a GPLP structure, showing that the land is unencumbered by a mortgage. It shows a ton of equity in the deal, which makes it a no-brainer for a lender to finance them.
Now, I'm sure you could probably speak to it more than I could, but I have heard of proposed ideas from the Conservative government of incentivizing certain municipalities to speed up their timeframes, and based on how quickly they can produce building permits, that will directly influence how much funding that particular municipality gets. Have you heard something about that proposal?
Yeah, and we have seen improvements in the process, within the last year, right? Unfortunately, some of these developments have started under previous policies, such as ours. They're still kind of getting bogged down in the process, But to be fair to municipalities, it's not all just delays on the municipal side with approvals. There's also delays on the developer side as well.
For sure.
And I've seen that firsthand as a developer working with consultants. Is that like we talked about at the beginning, if you're not holding your consultants' feet to the fire to get their work done, that causes a lot of delays as well, right? And unfortunately, days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, and before you know it, you're half a year, 3/4 of a year, and you really haven't made major substantial steps in the development process because of just delays on your side with your team, with your consultants, and all that.
Honestly, having a background in property management and project coordinating, it's like half the time the job is just finding where that piece of paper and whose desk is lying it on, and so you can push it to the next desk and just kind of walk it down the path, because stuff gets lost in the shuffle and then it's out of sight, out of mind. Next thing you know, as you said, 6 months pass and you're nowhere, right?
Yeah, it's important. Like, everybody's busy. All of these consultants, we have a lack of, professional consultants and planners and engineers, and architects and surveyors in the province, right? All of these individuals are slammed with, with clients and trying to get stuff approved. And yeah, so it's, like I said, it's really important to really keep your team accountable. And by that, I mean like weekly Zoom meetings with everybody, all the players, and making sure, okay, here's what our goal is for this week. We need the documents from the surveyor by Friday so that they can go off to the next consultants. And so it's really important having like these weekly accountability meetings with your development team. Absolutely.
That's amazing. Which, plays in nicely to, us talking about leadership as well. Now, I know that you have, legalsecondsuites.com. And so, as I said, you guys have been instrumental in helping us with the design and, any sort of minor variances and walking us through the committee of adjustments. When you're kind of educating the public right now, or like, potential clients, or even just generally from like from what you're seeing as trends locally, have you seen a lot of shifts away from like duplex conversions into bigger things? Like, what are you starting to see is the the best place where somebody who's new can start to kind of make a few bucks in real estate investing?
Yeah, so we're seeing a shift on two fronts, and I'm seeing it. I'm I'm speaking from my perspective with the clients that we work with coming through our office, and so we see our investor clients, shifting out of duplex conversions and 2-unit conversions, even 3 and 4-unit conversions, and they're shifting into the more medium density conversions. Maybe it's a vacant commercial building to residential apartment units. It's like these 6, 8, 10-unit conversions. Maybe it's a small infill land development where they've done a split and sever, and they're maybe building a new purpose-built triplex or fourplex or something. Because they're not really seeing the return or the cash flow from the smaller, very low density types of projects. So they're shifting into these, I guess, bigger projects, if you will. But we're seeing a lot of homeowners coming in and filling the void, if you will, in the secondary suite space. And the reason for that is because homeowners are doing it now out of affordability reasons. They need that rental basement suite or what have you, just to afford their mortgage payment. And we're seeing a lot of like middle-aged boomers, kind of looking at it for their kids. I've had countless conversations in the last number of weeks about boomers looking to create space on their own, within their own home or on their own property for their kids. Their kids are
COVID really shook up that industry big time, where you couldn't go visit a loved one because they shut all the old folks' homes down and that kind of thing. So what better solution than to build space within the confines of your own home?
So, we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of that is happening right now. And, so obviously, like we're still very, busy in the secondary suite space, creating these units for clients, but it's a different client base. It's homeowners now, in that space versus the investor. But like I said, all of our investor clients are getting into the bigger projects. And same thing with myself, we're kind of getting out of the secondary suite space and moving into more like land development and adaptive reuse projects and just more, really, any sort of building or house that's big enough that you can add multiple units to. We're looking at just trying to find the highest and best use for a building or a piece of land. And like the opportunities are out there. They're everywhere. Like there's so much space that we have, within our existing built forms, our existing homes and buildings, like to add units. And the changes that the province has made, the changes that municipalities are making with zoning, it is getting a lot easier to do things as of right, when it comes to creating these units.
Have you seen a lot of people exiting Ontario because of like the stringent rules and the delays in build times and I know obviously the landlord tenant board is very challenging to navigate through. Have you seen a trend in that direction?
Yeah, like absolutely. So on one front, we do have some positive changes happening with policies and regulations. On the other front, it's death by 1,000 cuts. The governments are kind of coming out with additional regulations, or they're not enforcing, the landlord-tenant laws well enough. That there's our capital is not being adequately protected here in Ontario. You talk to some other investors that are out of province or out of, some of our immigrants, our new immigrant investors that are coming here, who actively invest in other countries around the world. They come here and they look at us Ontarians and in Canada and they think we're nuts for the amount of capital that we spend for the return that we get, and how much we put at risk with inadequate protections of that capital. And by inadequate protections, I mean all of the new regulations coming out against us and the lack of enforcement at the landlord-tenant board for non-payment of rent. We have non-payment of rent issues where people are pretty much living for free, and our capital is not protected. We have death by 1,000 cuts with Airbnb rental licensing, short-term rental licensing, just rental licensing in general. And it's getting increasingly difficult for a property owner, even small mom and pop landlords, to, you know, make a livelihood, or even just, like the mom and pop landlord who just wants to do a basement apartment just to help supplement their mortgage payment is having difficulty now in Ontario.
Well, I find that, you could have a college degree on filling out forms at the LTB, I find, and you make one little mistake of some sort and you wait 8 to 9 months to go to a hearing, and that mistake gets brought up, and then they throw out your thing and say, please resubmit. It can bury people, and I've seen it, unfortunately. We actually, you helped us on the building on Cannon Street, the triplex that we did. We were approached by that building owner, and this is just a lovely individual, probably one of the sweetest people I've met in this business. Just wanted to buy a property for her son, and she just got raked over the coals. All three tenants decided to stop paying. She was $58,000 in arrears.
Yeah.
And so she was like, buy this property from me. And the one way we managed to salvage it was we built in an equity portion, because obviously, like, the place was just trashed, and so we had to renovate it. So we were like, no, stay on as a partner and bring us the value. We agreed on what the value of the place would be worth. Stay on as a partner, and then we'll help bring it up to snuff. And that place is just rocking and rolling right now. And she got to keep the asset, which at the end of the day was the important part.
Yeah, like it's very challenging here. There's no doubt. Like, I don't want to be over optimistic with all of this stuff and paint a wonderful paintbrush. There's a lot of challenges. I see the difficulty that our office has sometimes with just getting permits approved, getting approvals done. Some of the nonsense that we get back from the municipal staff about a certain project. The amount of application forms and that we have to fill out. Even on my townhouse development, just to get like all of the forms that we have to fill out for this particular development is insane. Like just everything from setting up the condo, getting it registered with Tarion, HCRA licensing, all of the financing. It's just document after document after, form after form after form. And it's like a full-time job just to be filling out, forms. And so it's kind of like, it's gotten, the pendulum has swung too far the other direction right now, where it's and the one thing with regulations is, they come out with a new regulation, and oftentimes there's a good valid reason why this regulation has kind of come into existence, but they just layer it on top of another one. So we have layers upon layers upon layers of regulations, and you think about the zoning bylaw. Well, back in the 1950s, or before the 1950s, there probably wasn't even a zoning bylaw. But when they came out with the zoning bylaw, it was maybe a thin little binder. Now the zoning bylaw is like huge, thick binders. It's so big that they can't even put it in binders now. Now it's all on the web, right? Same thing with the building code. Like, the building code used to be like a small little, 1-inch thick kind of document. Now it's for like 3-4 binders thick of building code.
Well, from a predictive standpoint, though, like, every single time one of these regulations gets piled onto the next, there is a ripple that has some sort of consequence in some other area where people didn't even necessarily consider. And unfortunately, with Ontario being, it's a hot topic in, from a political standpoint, from affordable housing, it's a hot topic from tenant regulations and laws. So, I know for us, for example, like, I probably won't be buying a tenanted property in Ontario anymore. I will buy vacant properties all day, every day, but I'm not going to go through any sort of a fight anymore. It's just not worth it. It's impossible to execute on a business plan. And, even if a property is like about to keel over and you have somebody hunkered down there, you're also liable for a person who doesn't want to move. And we've had those situations. I mean, you remember Cannon Street. We literally had to jack the building up like 6 inches. And like, this one tenant who was like, I'm not moving. It's like, well, this building is structurally unsafe. You should probably, help yourself, But unfortunately, it's just the way it is. And that's why we're actually looking all over the U.S. right now. I was out in Alberta last week, actually. So There's lots of exciting stuff happening, and it just seems that, like, to your point, when you lack control over your capital in the business, people will refrain from wanting to invest as much. And that in itself, you keep layering on these regulations, that will have a residual effect. And what that actually transpires or comes out as is higher rents. You have less people that are adding more units. You're going to have more people reliant on units that are priced out of, just out the yin yang. So,
like, the reality is, capital can move very easily now in the modern age. No longer does an investor or capital have to remain in its home country. It can easily move across borders and find a better return elsewhere. And that's going to happen no matter what government or what any policymaker comes out with. The sad reality is that, in Ontario, when they need so much housing, they're disincentivizing everybody, even mom and pop landlords, from investing in housing. It creates less investment in the renovation of existing housing. So we're going to see more buildings get run down because of lack of investment in them, which makes for even worse living situations for those that are renting. The big developers, look, it's not easy creating housing. It's a lot of work trying to create, renovate, get permits, get approvals, manage trades, contractors. It's not an easy business, and the guys that do have the skill set, do have the capital, they're getting sick and tired of it. And they're looking for easier jurisdictions to do business. And this is why we do see a flood of capital moving down south to the southern U.S. Sunbelt, to business-friendly, landlord-friendly environments. We see big developers up here, the big home builders, the developers that are creating thousands of housing units. They're going down south and doing subdivisions down there instead of here in Ontario because they get treated better down there.
Sure.
We see it in the media, right? We see it in the media here, like how great developers get dragged through the mud and made out to look like these evil, greedy people here in Ontario. And look, that wears on these individuals after a while.
For sure.
Right? Look, all I'm trying to do is create housing here. I'm trying to do my part. It's a business. We're creating jobs. We're creating housing. Look, like, profit is not a bad word. Everybody needs to make money in order to survive, right? And these guys, they're creating jobs. Think of how many jobs come from when one housing unit is created, right? It's not just direct construction jobs. It's planners, engineers, architects, people who work at
lawyers,
100%, garbage collectors, people who make furniture for these houses, people who work at factories and make appliances for these houses, painters, home decor. Like, so much of our economy is tied up, in the housing sector when a housing unit gets created. So why are we?
And it's wild that those people that create these opportunities locally get all the slack for it. But you look at a company like Apple or Nvidia, who are pulling in billions and billions in profit, and nobody has qualms buying the latest iPhone after having one for a year.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more. It's unfortunate, and we've also seen a big exodus to places like New Brunswick and to Alberta. That's part of the reason we're kind of looking in these areas. I know Calgary's already pretty developed, but it was like a year ago. I think I had talked to like 10 or 15 different people in that year that were like, yeah, I'm just selling my house right now because I'm moving to New Brunswick because I'm just done with this. I'm not even going to bother renting my place. Just tear it down if you want, do what you want with it.
But look, there's always going to be challenges in, any industry that we're in, right?
For sure.
There's always going to be challenges. And as a business owner, as an investor, this is where your skill set comes in, and how do you navigate these waters? How do you go about your business? And in a time when we do have a lot of people kind of maybe exiting the industry here in Ontario, don't kid yourself. There's plenty of opportunity for those that do know how to navigate these waters, who will be able to, come out very well on the other side of this, and be able to capitalize on the opportunity that is right here in front of us.
Honestly, I'm actually very glad you said that, because I know we're sitting here naysaying, opportunities here locally, but I'm actually very much with you. I think that, as people tend to leave, and if you are good locally, that actually creates abundance locally as well. And so that's why, like, we might not be buying, like, this, I'm talking personally. I won't speak for you, Ken, but for us personally, like, we might not be buying like tenanted multifamily properties that you can't execute a business plan on locally. We'll still develop properties. We'll still buy and fix, and we'd flip. We'd also buy to rent. Of course, we own a portfolio, and the majority of it's here in Ontario, and we would still be bullish on continuing with that. It's just, you also have to consider what elements of your business you can and can't control. And if there's an element to your business that is based off of chance, I don't think that's a good business strategy. So, put the cards in your, figure out what your strengths are, where you can really capitalize. And I think that's kind of the best place to start and to be aggressive.
Let's be honest, Alex, like turning over an existing tenanted multi-residential building, like, are you really being that creative? As an investor, as a developer, all you've done is buy an existing stock, and you're removing people, and you're undertaking unit turnovers and renovation. Like, that's not really creating housing. Yes, you're renovating housing, sure. But, that's not really being a super uber creative business person. Like,
for sure,
you're not impressing anybody because you just went out and bought an existing building and you kicked out tenants and you've done unit turns.
Which is a great actual point on that. How are you finding the commercial to residential conversions? Because that's, I think, something that a lot of people, we're hearing a lot of stuff in the media about the commercial market and what kind of a hit that's, when a lot of these mortgages are going to come to fruition, they're really going to get slammed because they just can't fill a lot of their vacancies. The interest rates are high. They're going to have to refinance to higher interest mortgages. There's all these kind of issues that are coming to fruition. A lot of it's probably towards the end of this year, we're going to start to see more things build up on that. But are you seeing that? Because there is pros and cons. I heard that there's actually a very small percentage of these commercial buildings that are actually viable to be converted to residential.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. This is where true, creative, entrepreneurs are coming into the space and actually creating housing from what is otherwise, an underutilized building that's not being used. We're not putting it to good use, right? This is where a true skill set comes in my opinion, of, taking a vacant building, right? We're not kicking out tenants, nothing like that. We're taking a vacant commercial building and we're creating housing. We're creating a whole whack of residential apartments in that building, and truly spurring the economy and making better use of our infrastructure. Now, to me, that's true skill set. That takes expertise to go through that process, and to navigate that process, and to actually be creating housing. There's so many vacant buildings around us. When you actually start looking for those particular types of buildings, there's so many vacant commercial buildings. And yes, we're seeing some like existing office buildings that are sitting quite vacant. Maybe they're only at 30% occupancy, so they're underwater from the numbers perspective. But one thing you have to keep in mind with converting commercial to residential is you do have to be very conscious of the building length to width ratio and the availability of windows, because some of these bigger office buildings that are very square, and like they only have windows around the perimeter. You have a lot of wasted interior floor space that you can't properly utilize into creating an apartment dwelling. It could be used for common amenity space, or a workout room, or whatever. So, we're very conscious of our building length to width ratio, access to windows, and access to exits, our means of egress. Those are very, very important things to consider. And we were reviewing it was a 6-story vacant. It was a 30% occupied office building, downtown Hamilton. Looked like a very good potential for residential conversion. However, the means of egress was going to be very, very challenging in this building. And what it was there's an elevator shaft and then 2 exit stairwells, but they were both in the same quadrant of the building.
I see.
And it would have been very, very costly to create a secondary exit stairwell on the opposite end of the building. This is a 6-story building, concrete, steel, core slab, is a very solid building. It would have been astronomical to have to basically cut through all of that to try and create a secondary stairwell. And so basically, the project wasn't really feasible to convert residential apartments without really, really massive sums of money, which just killed the NOI of the building. And so we couldn't make the numbers work. So obviously, when you're considering a commercial building for residential conversions, obviously, you have to be working with proper consultants who can kind of, understand the code requirements, the zoning requirements, and making sure that you're analyzing the building properly. But, that's a skill set, right? And that's where, there's ample opportunity for investors and developers to kind of get into that space and convert these vacant buildings, right? And actually do a good thing for our society by creating housing, not renovating people, actually doing good by creating housing.
That's why we love working with you. We've you've got the eye for the design, and all these questions, and that's awesome. But honestly, Ken, I wasn't surprised. I know when you and I spoke earlier, I was like, you know what, we're going to blink and it's going to be 45 minutes that pass by. So we are getting to the end of our conversation right now. But I do want to have you back on for another for another chat in the next few months, because I just think that you're an absolute wealth of information. You have such great insight when it comes to building and just Ontario, everything that is just super value add. So once again, my gratitude to you. You've done so great, and we're all so proud of you, and you're just awesome. So if people want to find you, what's the best way they can reach out?
I'm pretty easy to find online. You just Google my name, Ken Bekendam. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. We do have our Second Suite website, legalsecondsuites.com. Very easy to find. If you want to reach out and chat about your particular project, or maybe about even partnering with us, book a consultation with me. And the link is on our website.
Awesome. And we'll also post the link to all of Ken's social in the show notes below. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Ken, for being such a great guy and such a wealth of information. Honestly, we love it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining me on today's episode of the Real Estate Leadership and Legacy Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please check out some of our other videos. We've got an abundance out there. We've got a lot of great insight and information, and we'll see you guys on the next one.